This case study critically analyzes and describes knowledge gained by a team of university-based design educators and researchers who engaged in the planning necessary to introduce specific aspects of design thinking in middle school classrooms in Denton, Texas, USA. The intent of this discourse is to provide readers with actionable means to effectively prepare the groundwork for introducing design thinking in middle school classrooms. In our case, the actionable knowledge we began seeking almost 3 years ago in mid-2018 and are still seeking is twofold. One, if the approaches and methods common to the process of designing, for instance, open-ended problem-based framing, iterative thinking and prototyping, recursive exploration and reflection, and failure as a learning heuristic, could be reconciled and enrich middle school pedagogical approaches that typically favor single right answers arrived at by engaging in a linear, expeditious manner. And two, whether this hybrid approach to learning could engender habits of mind that could transcend subject matter to become meta-level skills upon which students could rely as they take on increasingly complex learning and life challenges.
In order to describe how our investigation would work in a way that was understandable to our educational partners and to dispel or attenuate widely held misconceptions about what the professional practice of design entails, for example, untethered creative expression, technological facility as an end rather than a means, visual selling and consumer demand creation, we employed design thinking. And that's a term that's now commonly in use that has come to mean the codification and use of design practices by non-designers seeking a system of user-centric problem understanding and solution seeking as an encapsulating descriptor for our efforts. This school district had a 30-plus year history of affording research teams from outside of our College of Visual Arts and Design opportunities to work with their administrators, advisors and consultants, instructors and students to pursue a wide variety of research initiatives. Previously, efforts by various members of our university's research community led our team to believe that our endeavor stood a reasonable chance of yielding some understandings about how and how not to introduce design thinking into middle school classrooms. While this did indeed occur to a degree, it did not occur at all in ways that we could have or should have anticipated.
What this case study will reveal is what our team learned from what failed to evolve as we had hoped it would with our attempts to interject a new pedagogical approach in the middle school classrooms.
We had hoped our attempts to introduce design thinking in middle school classrooms would help students learning in those settings construct new knowledge for themselves by engaging in the following 4 steps inherent in this approach. Number 1, build empathy for the needs of people unlike themselves, their users, through research. Number 2, suggest new ideas, lots of them, that could help their users improve a given undesirable situation in their daily lives. Number 3, develop a selection of their new ideas into various prototypes that they could then test. Finally, number 4, by engaging in this testing process, assess which prototypes were the most and least effective at meeting their particular users' needs.
An overarching catchphrase that we developed early on as we attempted to explain design thinking to the array of stakeholders in the school district we would be working within was that design thinking is an iterative process to help students develop lots of ideas and then eliminate all but the strongest among them based on their assessments of which of these ideas work best as prototypes on behalf of specific users. We felt it was important to use this catchphrase as a way to remind ourselves and our collaborators that design thinking was an effective means to, 1, develop critical thinking skills, such as being able to perceive a given issue from multiple points of view. 2, reason from logical rather than passionate perspectives. 3, use evidence to support statements and courses of action, even if this evidence disconfirms your own personal ideas. And 4, avoid falling in love and then staying married to the first idea you develop.
The initial response to our articulation of these ideas and to our further articulation that they could be used to frame a qualitative research platform that would operate as a case study was met positively by our school district-based collaborators.
As the course of our early interactions with school district officials progressed, they changed from initially supporting the idea that design thinking could be introduced differently, or not at all, in some of the classrooms within which we were being allowed to introduce it, to insisting that all classrooms we would be allowed to work within have design thinking be introduced into them.
This insistence made it impossible for us to compare and contrast how the same type of project-based parameters would affect students' and instructors' responses to our project-based prompts, as well as students' abilities to engage in iterative design decision-making processes, and also students' willingness to learn from having some of their prototypes fail while others succeeded.
What had been planned and initially agreed upon as a way to learn from what could happen in middle school classrooms that were given virtually the same set of project parameters, except that one set would evolve as a project guided by design thinking and the other would evolve without it, did not occur.
These aspects of our preparation processes revealed a fundamental misunderstanding about how and why we framed research as we did, and how and why school district administrators, advisors, and instructors did. It also highlighted the fact that educational approaches are shaped by sociocultural imperatives as much as they are by any desire for discovering and implementing effective pedagogy. We also proposed it as a complex phenomenon that could be studied in depth for a specified period of time within a set context, like a middle school classroom.
While design and the arts share common visual language and exploratory methods, the two endeavors part company at the level of intent: creative self-expression versus evidence-based problem solving on behalf of others.
Because of this, we worried, rightly so, that our design thinking exercises and their underlying philosophy would be at odds with the accepted culture animating these classrooms. Moreover, because the finished prototypes would visually resemble typical results of student visual arts projects, it would become too easy to conflate our design thinking-based outcomes with the creation of more traditionally and intuitively guided visual arts artifacts.
Siloed subject orientation, incommensurate classroom learning culture, and likely misperceptions about what should constitute the final work product were not the only possible barriers to our success. Underlying and amplifying all of these dynamics was the requirement that we align our approaches with the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Framework as mandated by the Texas Education Agency.
The learning outcomes stipulated by the TEKS framework were not necessarily out of line with our agenda, but aligning them with how we felt design thinking should be introduced as an approach and as a set of working methods proved to be ineffective. Processes for productively integrating what we were proposing into their curricular planning efforts were not realized, as this was not articulated clearly enough early on as an essential goal.
This failure to broadly introduce design thinking occurred despite the fact that we were afforded the opportunity to work early in the process with our middle school partners in 2 day-and-a-half-long workshops that afforded us an opportunity to co-develop curricular templates based on approaches rooted in understanding by design. The essential premise of Understanding by Design is to guide the planning of curriculum and learning experiences in ways that emphasize the outcomes that a student should achieve from engaging in a given lesson or activity rather than the lesson or activity itself. The difficulties posed by having closely aligned lessons guided by design thinking with institutionally imposed curricular frameworks such as Understanding by Design and the TEKS were not the only barriers that affected the success of our efforts. Another was the fact that the school district had limited funds available to pay for substitute teachers. This became problematic because it prevented the full-time middle school instructors we were attempting to partner with the sufficient time necessary to plan lessons guided by design thinking from leaving their classrooms long enough to effectively work with us to plan them.
As a result, our full-time middle school faculty partners were not able to be absent from their respective classrooms to work with us to plan lessons and projects rooted in design thinking for more than 1 to 3 days, non-consecutively per semester. As a result of this, key opportunities were lost to 1, seamlessly integrate student learning outcomes with the planned execution of lesson or project plans guided by design thinking. 2, work realistically within or in light of non-fungible classroom realities such as timing, sequencing, and student expectations. And 3, develop project-based learning opportunities that had resulted from a collaboration which allowed all parties to bring to bear their unique perspectives as the design thinking lesson plans were conceived, shaped, and assessed. When executed with a clear understanding of its purpose as a method for fostering empathy, creativity, and innovation, design thinking can be a powerful tool for learning and change. If it is hastily and inexpertly implemented by educators with a weak or incomplete understanding of its principles, however, it is likely to be a waste of energy and precious classroom time.
Our now 3+ years of interactions with a diversely populated group of school district administrators, subject matter coordinators, curricular advisors, and consultants, our non-university-based research project partners, have clearly revealed the need for us to have more concise and purposeful dialogue around 3 key issues. We, as art and design educators and researchers, needed to frame and manage the expectations of our non-university-based research partners more effectively than we did about the knowledge and insights among students and teachers that these kinds of learning experiences could and could not yield. Second, in order for groups of middle school students we work with on a per-project basis to utilize design thinking to 1, empathize with the needs of others, 2, organize what they learn from this into a design strategy, and then 3, generate lots of ideas that could have been tested and assessed as prototypes, we needed to work much more closely and collaboratively with the instructors of these students to ensure that the lessons plans being created to guide specific design thinking projects were actually feasible in those instructors' classrooms. And third, in order for our university-based team of design educators and researchers to effectively introduce and study design thinking in this school district's middle school classrooms, a clearly understood definition of what actually constitutes research in this area needed to have been agreed upon early by our university-based team and the school district's administrators, curricular advisors and consultants, and the middle school educators who were involved in this endeavor.
Our university-based team's failure to engage early on in more deeply plumbed and broadly informed critical discussions with key middle school-based personnel from our partner school district severely limited the knowledge that introducing design thinking into our chosen school district's actual middle school classroom settings could have yielded. With that stated, we emerged from our engagement in this partnership with what we feel are crucial understandings about how to prepare to engage in the planning processes necessary to effectively introduce project-based learning experiences in middle school classrooms that are guided by design thinking. Equally as important, we emerged with crucial understandings about how not to engage in these types of planning processes, including knowledge that we believe could help others in the design education and design research communities avoid making some of the mistakes we made.